Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Lougheed Speaker Series. My name is Kendra Woodall, and I am the course coordinator for two of our interdisciplinary courses, INTD 207 and 307, and these are offered through the Peter Lougheed School of Leadership. Our mission at the Peter Lougheed School of Leadership is to empower students to become transformational leaders in their fields. Lougheed Speaker Series is one of the offerings of Peter Lougheed School of Leadership that we hold 4 to 5 times per academic year. This speaker series supports our students' learning in each of our INTD 101, 207, 307, and 407 courses. Our event today is in collaboration with the Peter Lougheed School of Politics and Democracy, which aims to cultivate a new generation of leaders by equipping students, policymakers, and the public with the critical skills to bridge divides, champion pluralism, and navigate the political landscape. To formally begin our program, Dr. Richard Field, director of the Peter Lougheed School of Leadership, will read our land acknowledgement, after which the new agency singers, led by Adrian LaChance, will honor us with an opening song. Please welcome Dr. Richard Field to the podium.
Thank you for coming this afternoon. We welcome you to this event, which we, as Kendra just mentioned, we proudly co-host with the Peter Lougheed School of Politics and Democracy. And both Peter Lougheed schools fall within the mandate of the College of Social Sciences and Humanities, and Dean Chris Anderson is head of that school. We're honored to have several distinguished guests with us today, and I would like to particularly welcome Peggy Garrity, right there, thank you, our U of A Chancellor Emerita, and Dr. Verna Yu, our University Provost and Vice President Academic. Yeah, thank you. The University of Alberta, its buildings, labs, and research stations are primarily located on the territory of the Nihiyu, Niitsitape, Métis, Nakota, Dene, Haudenosaunee, and Anishinaabe lands that are now known as part of Treaties 6, 7, and 8, and homeland of the Métis. The University of Alberta respects the sovereignty, lands, histories, languages, knowledge systems, and cultures of all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit nations. And we are now honored if you could give us the song blessing.
Thank you for that powerful opening. I'd like to now invite Dr. Eric DeYoung, Project Coordinator for Peter Lougheed School of Leadership, to introduce our Chancellor.
Thank you, everybody. Well, today we welcome Chancellor Nizar Somji for his talk titled Fostering Social Innovation, the Role of Entrepreneurship and Research in Addressing Homelessness, Addiction, Poverty, and Crime in Urban Areas. Nizar J. Somji, an accomplished engineer and entrepreneur committed to innovation, serves at the University of as the University of Alberta's 23rd Chancellor. Over the past 40 years, Nizar has been involved in numerous entrepreneurial initiatives. He is actively engaged in local and global communities, creating initiatives and fostering strategic partnerships to drive innovation and develop talent. His ongoing commitment is to encourage young people to focus on education, to improve their own lives, and to uplift the community and the world. Nizar is the founder of multiple successful businesses. Most widely known was his creation of the leadership of Matricon Incorporated. The company became an international leader in industrial automation. Matricon was started in Edmonton with local talent and grew into a global entity that was acquired by Honeywell in 2010. Today, he remains the chairman of the Jaffer Group of Companies. The Jaffer Group of Companies has invested more than $130 million in Alberta through ventures in construction, staffing, information technology, realty, hospitality, petroleum, and property management. A U of A graduate with a master's in chemical engineering, Nizar supported advancing education and industrial innovation by funding 2 engineering research chairs at the U of A. His contributions led to significant developments in process control and automation, which were adopted by multinational corporations. In 2024, he received his Doctor of Business Administration. He is a current member of EPCOR's Board of Directors and chair of KV Capital, a Western Canadian equity fund enterprise. He has also served on the boards of Zafin Incorporated, Redline Communications, and Critical Control Energy Services Corporation. Please welcome to the stage for me, Dr. Nizar Somji.
Thank you for that introduction. And first of all, I want to thank you all for coming, spending your evening here. And I'm sure you're thinking after listening to this introduction is that what is it about me that motivates or drives me to have this presentation today? Because clearly it's not. There might be feedback. Right. So it's clearly not an entrepreneurial venture. We're not building a global company or so on. So why is it that I am so interested and invested in this topic? So when I was installed as the Chancellor in June of 2024, prior to that, as I was preparing to be Chancellor, someone asked me, so what is going to be your mission over the next 4 years as Chancellor and so on? And I've always felt that this whole area of having worked in downtown, lived in downtown, seeing what's happened, and traveled to many of the major centers in North America to see the absolute devastation created by homelessness. And then having spent 9 years in Africa and Pakistan, East Africa and Pakistan, where actually things have improved. And so problems that are supposed to be third world problems have now embraced here. So I decided that would be my mission. And then, unknown to me, Chancellor Emeritus Peggy Geraghty had actually developed a social innovation paper that was released in time for her departure and my arrival. So it seemed like the stars were all aligned and we were all kind of coming together to focus on this. So my hope today is really not to share any expertise with you, since I don't have any, but to basically spark your interest in engaging in this conversation, right? And I'll share with you my thoughts. Some of them may seem a little outrageous, some of them may seem too simplistic, some may be too complicated, but I'll share my thoughts with you. And if I've ignited that interest in you, or ignited that desire, okay, I need to get out today and do something about it, then I think we have accomplished something today. So we'll do a bit of definition of what social innovation is, what social entrepreneurship is. I'll share with you some global examples, some personal examples as well, and then give you a bit of a thought process. Who are the stakeholders? But more importantly, my focus really is, what is the role of academic institutions in this area? And why is it we are not where we need to be, and why, and what did it take to get us somewhere? And then, of course, what are we doing at the Senate and at the Chancellor's office? So you get to hear that. So before I go there, though, I thought I'll give you a bit of a background of what social challenges in the broadest form are, right? And we hear a lot of homelessness as it relates to both affordability, housing shortage, and so on. And then you hear about the economic inequality, and probably more so south of the border than here, but clearly the economic inequality here is equally high. You hear about segregation, you hear about crime, you hear about access to health care and what various health services integrated. Mental health has become perhaps one of the prime discussion points. I'm happy to see the CEO of the Alberta Psychological Association here and folks from there, because I think it's an important part of solving this problem. But we don't hear as much about isolation and loneliness, and then all other factors that bring back together humanity and brings people together to be able to do something. So one would argue, and others have, that these are isolated failures that can be solved in isolation, and I'd suggest they're really a symptom of a true structural background. And during my installation speech, I said this, that in a country that has as much wealth as we do, right, for us to see what is happening in our streets, which is really, if you go back a few years, was really a problem away from us, was in the developing world, places we visited, but not here, and you're seeing it here. So what is the human cost of poverty, right? And you'll hear many things about it, but it is perhaps the greatest biological and social risk, right? Factors for mental health and disorders worldwide, right? And as a result of that, right, they have a big, significant impact on the ability of people to perform as humans, to perform in a real life way, right? And this is a particularly, the impact is particularly more astute in children and in youth. Right? And so something we all need to look at and do something about. Right? And so in my analysis to look at what are the root causes, right? I think the root causes come from, categorized in three different areas: the economic drivers, institutional drivers, and of course, political and equity drivers. If you look at from an economic standpoint, there are two things. One is the economic structure, which is somewhat uneven, and rising costs of housing, food, transportation, health, and other things. And the equivalent decrease in income levels of people that have not been able to keep up with the rising costs. Then you have the fragmented services, right? And the lack of social safety nets. And also the services, whether it's education, health, access, funding, are all very distributed. Then you have the whole political and equity drivers, whether it's racism or segregation or the concentration of political power. And but one of the big transformations, and I'll share with you a 2013 commitment made by the government of Alberta, was the government has transitioned from being a provider of these services to now being a partner. And so when you have nobody else to partner with, you leave a vacuum in between where services are not handled. So these are structural design failures. These are actually not moral failures. This is not somebody having a moral decision to declassify a certain group of people or do something. These are actually structural design failures, and that's what I'm going to talk about a little bit. So I was, in my preparing for this presentation, I researched data and looked for data. And there are various sources of data, Homewood Trust, City of Edmonton, others. They provide a high-level understanding of homelessness. But what they're showing, even if you don't agree with the absolute numbers, what they are showing, though, is that the problem is growing and getting out of control. And I think that's the message in there. In a book by Colburn and Eldon, Homelessness is a Housing Problem, they suggest that the rising cost of housing is the primary root cause of homelessness. Right? Now, that is particularly true as we look at urban centers, right? And if you look at the increase in pricing, both rent and otherwise, has made it unaffordable for people to have homes. Mental health experts, on the other hand, argue that family breakdown, right, either related to financial strain or violence or other factors or whatever else there may be, is a driver of homelessness, right? But one thing we know for sure, and data has shown that First Nations, newcomers to Canada, women and children are disproportionately impacted. That, I think, is agreed to by everyone. What I think was surprising to me, right, and as part of my mission in my role, is that there was no data from any of the academic institutions that I could find, right, that actually researched what the extent of the problems were, what the percentages of the root causes were, how this was material. And so when I look at the talent that exists in the academic institutions in North America, but also primarily in Alberta, why is that not happened, right? And so it's part of my mission to bring this to you. I'll just show you something from Homewood Trust, right, which gives you an idea, right, of the number of people experiencing homelessness that is growing. What I didn't show here is that the number of deaths as a result of homelessness is 10 times what it was 4 or 5 years ago. So it is actually having a significant cost on the lives of people as well. Now, these are people who are actually homeless, but there's a large group of people that go from between having a home to homelessness, which is various levels of homelessness. And that is a very significant number. And some argue it's in the 10 to 15% of our population. So in 2013, much smarter people than me put together what is called the Alberta Social Policy Framework Report. And that report had 8 priorities. And priority number 8 was a 10-year commitment or a plan to end homelessness. Right? So for those mathematicians in this room, you know that passed now and doesn't, we are past that. Right? Now, they had other things which I think were important and would have been useful. One was the common services access. Right? If you talk to anyone, access to services is a nightmare for people who really don't have the capacity to negotiate the complication. And for those of you who have ever been to hospital, if you actually, if you are there and you have someone with you there, the ability for you to get service is twice or 10 times as much as if you were alone or didn't have the ability to navigate that, right? So the argument they had was we will have results-based budgeting and we will have safe communities. And 13 years later, the communities are less safe and less so. So why? All right. Why has Canada and Alberta elected? So first I'll give you the official version, then I'll give you my view, which you may not like. So the official version is that it's as a result of fragmented policy, risk aversion. The public sees that as somebody else's problem. It sees that as a government's problem or some of the charities. There are few accelerators. But my argument is there's also a talent and education gap. We don't have talented individuals that, for example, have been built in other parts of the world that have had this for 50, 60 years, where people who understand what it takes are willing to do the research, develop curriculum for students coming out of school that will learn and solve this problem. My view on is, and I say this many times, is related to the definition of insanity. We continue to do the same thing, but expect a different result. And the reality is there is no different result. And the answer to all the problems are, we need to add more housing, we need to do this, to do that. But none of those things are actually solving the problem. They are just creating additional need for problems. All right? I also argue that these things require a multifaceted approach, right? They require business and others all to come together, require innovation, creativity. And I'll give you some examples of innovation, creativity done elsewhere to give her. I also think the biggest issue beyond the definition of insanity is the lack of courage and commitment. Like nobody wants to step up and say, I'm going to take charge of this problem. You have actually not seen in any of these elections or anywhere else that this is going to be my problem. For the next 5 years or 4 years of my term, I'm going to work on this problem. Now, we saw that in environmental net 30, net zero in 2030, net zero in 2050. We've seen a lot of those commitments, but we've not seen any commitments as it relates to this. So perhaps it's time for us to pursue that. There is a lack of various types of ecosystem constraints, right? And various partnerships and both financial and business and other stuff. So that's my view of why we haven't moved forward. That doesn't mean we can't, all right? I also want to share with you the cost, because the cost is actually quite interesting, right? As much as otherwise, it takes about, anyway, from $70,000 to $110,000, according to the studies I read, per homeless person to access emergency services alone. Right? And the government has spent millions of dollars, the city spends millions of dollars, homeless people spend some time in the hospital, come out, go back, come back, so you see a huge. The total cost is in the billions, all right? But I don't think we see that kind of financial commitment to actually address this problem. So we're paying for the crisis, but we are not investing in how we prevent this. So I thought I would start by giving you a different perspective, which is what is innovation? Because social innovation asks us to look at these problems from a different lens, right? And so, it's really looking at how we develop, implement new ideas, new products, new services, new models, new policies, things that are innovative, that allow us to look at how do we effectively use the resources we have to create improved outcomes, right? And they are outcomes for individuals, for communities, and for societies as well, right? And so we need to transition from how we solve social problems into a concept of innovation, which is creating something new, right? And one of the quotes I added here, a novel solution to social problems that is more effective, efficient, sustainable, or just than the existing solutions we have, right? And if you look at moving encampments downtown or moving homeless people from one area to the other, is not just. It does not solve anything. It just moves a problem from point A to point B. All right? And social innovations differ in many ways because they target things with a different set of lens. Right? They target things to look at how meaningful change and how the impact and what the impact will be on the people that they are dealing with, right? And so it's about improving well-being, it's about inclusion, it's about finding a way of making scalable, sustainable over the long term, right? And it's also about multi-sectoral collaboration. How do you bring so many, if you look at today in Edmonton, there are so many entities that are looking to do this. But none of them have come together. None of them have actually helped reduce the problem. They have done their share, but they've not brought it together because they don't have the talent, don't have the research or the creativity that we can bring from an academic perspective to drive that, right? So my hope is that we can talk about social innovation, which Peggy started in her term, is really the answer of how we go after this. Now, having heard my background, as you know, it's as an entrepreneur, I always look at what are the things that also allow people to move away from this. So education is probably the primary thing. But the other is, how do people get a job? How do they make a meaningful, earn a meaningful income? How do they support their families? How do they work that? So social entrepreneurship, to me, is extremely powerful as a way of creating long-term scalable solution. And I don't know how many of you have heard of Bill Drayton. Anyone heard of Bill Drayton? So Bill Drayton was the founder of Ashoka, and I'll talk about him in a few minutes, but he's considered the godfather of social entrepreneurship, right? And it's about funding and creating opportunities, right, where the goal is really a social or an environmental impact rather than maximizing profits, right? So how do you create these ventures, business ventures, and I'll give you some examples that sustain themselves so that people have a meaningful way to earn a living, right? So Bill Drayton says social entrepreneurship is about marrying mission with markets, right? But the solutions that are done elsewhere may not be applicable to us, and that's part of my mission to look at that. So the mission is to make money. But the goal is to really improve the lives of people so that the money that is made is continuously reinvested in that growth path of going, right? So, Peter Drucker, a well-known writer, talks about entrepreneurship is neither a science or an art. It is a practice when it comes to social entrepreneurship. It's about creating a practice, right? And there is complex governance structures where you blend not-for-profit, for-profit, and cooperative structures. We sometimes annoy people who are there just to make money, or people who are there to do not to make money, but to serve. But that blend is a complex thought process that needs to be looked at. All right? So let's talk about Bill Drayton. He's the godfather of social entrepreneurship, I said. He founded Ashoka. Ashoka was devoted to identifying social entrepreneurs around the world, right? And his message was, from little acorns do great trees grow. And he is known to have funded hundreds of social entrepreneurship efforts around the world. But the one you probably have heard most was the Grameen Bank. And Muhammad Yunus, who won the Nobel Peace Prize, is considered a banker to the poor. And he is singularly credited for taking women out of poverty in Bangladesh. And there's been a lot of PhD and theses and so on done on his work. And he started by giving small amounts of money to mostly women in Bangladesh to start, either with sewing or a little bit of farming or a little bit of this, ability to sell, and ability to reinvest the money and grow. And he had, and if I recall correctly, a 99% return rate, where women that received the money returned the money, 99% of them. So the loss factor was very small. But the amounts were small too, right? But the biggest change I saw in my 9-10 years in volunteering in Africa and Pakistan is the telecom fintech model. This telecom money, or as they call it, M-Pesa, Pesa is money, or Airtel Pesa in East Africa, or Easy Pesa in Pakistan, is a way where people can transact using their phones, can transact money without having credit cards or banking. And this concept has been directly linked, right, to enable small commerce, reduce poverty, and vulnerability. And I'll talk a little bit more about this, and I'll also tell you why I think it has not happened here, right? So the key is it succeeds because the capital and the infrastructure is created to support them, right? So who knows who Go Banyo is? Yeah, not you. Who knows who Go Banyo is? Anyone? Anyway, this is one of my favorite subjects. A bunch of young engineers did this in Europe and came up with a concept called washing is dignity. So they redid this bus. And now there's hundreds of these, right? So they converted this bus that would offer hot showers, clothing distribution, lockers, toiletries, and a social service referral. And they would drive this bus to various areas where homeless were known. What they found was very interesting, was that a person taking a shower felt completely refreshed, felt human again. And their mindset fundamentally changed. And they used to offer clothing and so on. But then they ran into a problem where the folks that were taking a shower so did not want to lose their clothes. They wanted their own clothes back. So they retrofitted these buses. The more recent ones have actually washing machines and drying machines. So they wash your clothes. They get temporary clothing while they wash your clothes, take your clothes and go out. Fundamentally changed the feeling. So now they're more open to receiving services, more open to look at different things and so on. I've argued, and I'm in the shower, I say this every time I come out of the shower, the person who invented the shower should have received a Nobel Prize, because to me it's the best invention. In 2024, during my first convocation, I had the privilege of awarding the honorary doctorate to Dr. Randy Gregg. And for most of you who know, Randy Gregg was a 5-time Stanley Cup winner and so on, and has done many, many philanthropic things in this city. But he shared a story with, how many of you were at that convocation? Okay, so sorry. So he shared a story about, so he was part owner of the Edmonton baseball team, right? And at the end of the game, he saw that there was a lot of hot dogs that were being thrown away. So he decided, at the end of the game, he told them all to put the hot dogs together, and he would take them to 96th Street, to the Bristol Center, and so on, 10, 11 at night, and distribute them to the folks there. So one day, it's his story, not mine, it was a little bit late, and they were all asleep, and suddenly one of them woke up and started shouting, "The hot dog man is here," right? Now, these people knew nothing about who Randy Gregg was, right? But just that particular service he did, right, created a positive setup. So it's not that hard. So, you know, being a soccer fan or football fan, if you like, you know, there's been a number of sports efforts to solve this. I first-hand experience when I was volunteering in East Africa in Arusha. The Aga University had a large parcel of land, and we had a lot of problems in the neighborhood with kids and so on. So we did one thing, which was very interesting. We built a soccer field. And then we built a soccer field. The young kids would come play soccer. A couple of ex-Tanzania national team players were now living in Arusha. They came forward and they volunteered their time to train these kids, both men and women, boys and girls. And suddenly the neighborhood decided, we don't want to create any chaos in this area. We added schools and so on, right? You know, English on Saturdays, transform. Small things that transform many things. So, you know, one of the things that has helped a lot of people in the third world, in the developing world, see is these doctors, ophthalmologists who go into some of these areas, and what's the surgery called? Sorry? Cataract surgery. So they would do hundreds of cataract surgeries, right, in an area, one after the other. They bring their own equipment and so on. And then within a couple of hours, these folks who could not see before start seeing. Now imagine the transformation that those things do. So I'm giving you these examples because I'm talking about what's possible when people come together to look at some of these problems. But I want to talk to you about M-Pesa in Kenya, because a lot of people have done PhDs and masters and so on researching this as to how this has impacted poverty, how it's alleviated poverty, right? And the whole thing is about transactions. How are you going to transact? So you are sitting down there, you have a little table, and you're selling onions and tomatoes and so on. And this is true in India and Pakistan also, but Kenya is more where this kind of grew. Right? You can come there and buy your tomatoes, pay them, right? And then they can use the money on their phone to buy more product, to sell more product, and quickly they're able to now feed their families, send the kids to school, and allow for expanded market access. Very easy, very simple. But the reason it was so important is because cash is easy to steal, right? But money in your phone is impossible to steal in those parts of the world. Right? So with all those reduced transaction costs and so on, I personally saw in my 9-10 years, I could see a small stall. By the time I came back the next time, it had doubled in size. Right? And when I was there to buy something, and I usually buy street food, and I was there to buy, they look at me, so can you not just give me M-Pesa? I don't want cash, right? Because it's risk to have that cash. So somebody said to me, the reason poverty exists, not because we can't feed the poor, it's because we can't satisfy the rich. So when it comes to the telecom and the banking system, which is my biggest issues in life, is the reason in the developing world this works is because the devices, the phones, are very cheap, right? They are like $5, $10 for a fully functional phone. The network access is very cheap. And all your incoming calls are free. So you will never, somebody will tell you, I'm not going to be able to call you. You just call me, right? If you want delivery of vegetables, fruits, whatever, just call me. I'm not calling you, right? There's zero transaction fees, and they have an extensive and very reliable network. Can anyone tell me why there are zero transaction fees?
There's no middleman.
There's no middleman, true. What else? The reason there's zero transaction fees is there's no middleman, A, because there's no bank in between, and two, these phone companies are storing millions of dollars of money in $2 and $5 and so on. And they're making their money. They don't need to come after you for fees. Right? So they have a system that makes money. Why doesn't it happen in North America? Expensive devices. Very expensive network fees. There's a banking monopoly on financial transactions, right? Canada has, and no kidding aside, one of the highest mobile service costs in the world. If I was calling Tanzania on my phone, it'd be $5 a minute, followed by $3 for the additional minute. If I was there, I can call any one of you here at 20 cents a minute. That's how big the difference is, right? And so I ask you, have you looked at the income statements? And this is just my plug for that. So that's why it's not happening, not because it can't happen. Now, for those of you who've seen life downtown, right, you know that most of the homeless people get money, right? They get money from the government or some. But how do they cash their check? Right? So the banks won't allow them into their banks. Right? So they go to these cash checking facilities, which you know, and which take 10 to 20% of their money and pocket it and give them the rest. So you're already not getting enough, now you're getting less. And then if they don't put it properly, if somebody realizes that somebody has money, it's gone. Right? So in my view, some of these things that exist elsewhere need to find a home somewhere. Right? So who are the stakeholders? All of us are the stakeholders. And according to Will Drayton, every one of us is a change maker. Right? And so I feel the government, the academia, business, venture capital, the community, right, all of those have to come together to be able to look at this as a solution. So how do you engage stakeholders? I think engage stakeholders is first and foremost access to education at all levels, early childhood development, finding a way of a common services access, primary care initiatives, partner with marginalized communities so that we can continue, youth training and employment, improvement of quality of life. If you take my example of the cataract surgeries, right? If you had a bus similar to that went around and provided basic primary health care, provided basic counseling, provided basic support, you could change lives, right? And so those are the things that we need to look at. My argument is simple when it comes to the role of academic and research. We have some of the best talent in the world, right? From medicine, to AI, to engineering, to business, to whatever. We have some of the best talent. We have the capacity to identify solutions. We are able to handle complex problems that have interconnected issues spanning multiple disciplines. And I was saying this to someone. In my young days, when I was here, we were looking at matrix of services, and you do matrix multiplication to get all this, to allow all this. So those complex problems, if you can solve them with the power of technology and the power of innovation, we can solve these problems. Also, academics can elevate and escalate these challenges with data, with fact, with results-based solutions, right? More than lay people like myself can. So my goal, which I'll come to soon, is that academics across all disciplines, they need to transition from publishing to piloting, from piloting to scaling, right? And we need to be able to collaborate and develop solutions to work together. So what are we doing at the Senate and so on? So USchool, many of you don't know what USchool is, but USchool is probably it's been around 15 years now, is the Senate's initiative to bring kids from grade 3 to 9 to university to spend a week to be able to understand what the university life is like. And the success on that, these are usually kids whose parents have not been to university, who come from difficult areas. They've come. And today we actually have many USchool volunteers who are students at the university who actually were part of USchool when it came. We are going to be launching on March 11th, and I'll tell you a little bit about 11th, a Social Innovation Award. The goal of the award is to bring researchers, encourage collaboration, right? Create solutions that unite, that are scalable, and more importantly, built on compassion, kindness, and so on. And I said this during my installation, I say this again. It is my hope, I'm sure I'll be dead by then, but that a researcher at the University of Alberta will win the Nobel Prize for their innovative research in solving this problem, because I feel this is a very significant problem. So I'll conclude. Oh man, I went too far. Okay. I just want to conclude by a couple of quotes here. I think that solving this problem has to be part of a value system. And so Mahatma Gandhi says it best: your actions become your habits become your values become your destiny, right? And my last thought, when I first went to Pakistan, and although I was a volunteer, I had a large team of people working for me, and they would come to me for very small problems. So one day I sit these guys down, my director says, why are you coming to me with these small things? Like, you get paid to solve these problems. You don't get paid to come talk to me. And I realized one thing, that they were concerned about the consequence. If they made a decision, they were concerned about the consequence because they felt that someone would beat them up if they made the wrong decision. So my comment to them was, in my X number of years of life, I've never fired anybody for making a mistake, but I fired many for doing nothing. So my idea is that there are many things to do, and some of the solutions I shared with you that happen globally may not apply here. What I'm really saying, though, is we need to continue to do something, whether it's the right thing or the wrong thing. Doing nothing is not an option. So, thank you so much for listening to me. I apologize. I apologize for going a few minutes over I'm supposed to.
So well done. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chancellor. You've given us a lot to think about, and we are excited to dig a little deeper into those ideas with our Q&A session, moderated by Dr. Eric DeYoung and Dr. Richard Field.
Wow, thank you. I enjoyed that a lot. Now, I work for the Peter Lougheed School of Leadership. We have a number of students in the room who have come to listen to you speak today. And I was thinking when you opened that you hope to spark conversation around social innovation, that with those students in the room, some of which who may have plans of being entrepreneurs or have desires to be entrepreneurs in the future, if you were to think back to your time as a student, and given what you've just said, how would you direct yourself, or perhaps some of the people in the room, the students in your room, to fill that gap that you recognized as being in the in your talk there?
So, when I went to school, and my bachelor's was in England. So in England, we didn't have the options we have here. We were there for 3 years, chop, you had to go in and go out. So we didn't have a chance to really learn what was happening elsewhere. When I look at the education system here, right, we have the ability to learn more about other things besides the career we are pursuing. Right? And so I look at saying, if I'm going to be an engineer, which I encourage everyone to be an engineer, that's the only thing you should look at. If you're going to be an engineer, there's part of you that needs to look at how you're going to grow and build your career and your life as an engineer and grow. But then you have to, I also ask, what are you going to do for some of the challenges the world faces, our community faces, and so on? So how are you going to equip yourself? And so for me, it would be to look at learning more about some of the, in some of the social classes where whether social sciences or the humanities and so on, take a bit of a broader education, take the opportunity, and within that, understand what are some of the challenges that face us here in North America, but also what people in the world face. Whether, as an example, if you're an environmental engineer, one of the key issues to look at is water. So are you going to learn a bit more about water scarcity, farming, where you are optimizing the use of water, some of those things. How are you going to expand your own base? So that kind of would be my advice to young people.
Yeah, and certainly, I'm sure there's people in the room that, as you said, as the entrepreneurs, there's always the first thing of wanting to make money. And there's other people in the room that are there to create change or make difference. And there's a little bit of a dichotomy between the two. And I think back to some of my research, things that I've done in psychology, where when you've had a number of proverbs, so I might provide another one of my own here, that it's when elephants fight, it's the grass that is trampled. Absolutely. And how can you get those two partners or those two people to align then, or what could the people in this room perhaps do to help that align?
That's actually a very well-known African proverb.
Oh, okay.
Since I've come from Tanzania, where we have more elephants. Well, the challenge we have with when these things collide is there's a lack of what I call purpose. Right? There's people feel that because and I always believe there's nothing wrong with making money. Make lots of money. The question is, what do you do with the money you make, right? And how are you going to use it? And what are you going to look at as your legacy in life, right? And so I think it's about how do you find that within those two elephants, how do you find that common purpose that brings these people together, right? And how are they going to make an impact and make a change in people's lives? And I believe in almost all of the titans fighting, there is common ground. And when they find that common ground, then I think they can continue to grow that. When you look at the pharmaceutical business in particular, right? They have for long done a much better job than most, except in North America. So the cost of drugs, I don't mean don't mean recreational drugs, the cost of medical drugs change with the income levels of the different countries, right? And it's actually quite remarkable how they've done it. Now, do they make less money? No, they make 10 times the money, right? But their goal is to, they use those platforms, whether it's Brazil or Uganda or wherever, platforms also for testing and so on. But they found a medium to be able to achieve that. So the question then you ask yourself is, why are the phone companies not finding that? Right? Well, why do other companies not find that ways of being able to balance these things, right? So that's my big beef, is to look at, if you get even, say, soft drink companies, right? Coca-Cola being one big one, but also others, right? There's one thing you will see almost every street corner in any part of the world you've ever been to is a sign of Coca-Cola, right? So the question is, how do they afford it? Well, they afford it because of the trademark systems that they have used and how they allow the local bottlers to bottle and sell and so on. It's a very different structure. So they found a way, they made it work and expanded their business. So there's ways of doing it.
And we'd hope there'd be more of them always. So, you were speaking at the end there about what the role of the university can be in this, and very recently, Dr. Verney, you released the University of Alberta's values, and one of the values was of impact through excellence, and it says that success is measured by life changed. So I guess I would ask you is that how do we get, we're speaking from the point of view of the College of Social Sciences and Humanities, which includes, of course, business, education, law, and the arts. How would you get those perhaps elephants to work together, or at the how to move the needle in some of these complex urban issues at the local scale?
So the simple answer is you need to be able to find the right research money that attracts the right people to work together to drive this area, right? Because I think where it's easy, for example, for some faculties like engineering and business and medicine to get research money, it's more complicated for some of the public health and social to get the money and the funding to be able to sustain this type of research. So you may get an occasional grant from person A or occasional grant from person B, but that grant dies. To get a longer term, right, is to be able to find a way of funding them so that others are attracted to it. So the award that we are looking at, it will be small funding, where we're hoping that that award will kind of grow and increase that will continue to create funding on an annual basis. That will encourage governments and others to also continue to add to it. So, if I got X from here, I can give you 2X from here, get 3X from here. And suddenly, faculty will create for themselves a reputation where industry will look at it. See, today, if I'm doing something in AI related to these huge trucks in oil sands, right? And I'm doing some AI work to be able to predict failures and so on. Syncrude and so on will fund me. But how do you get them to think that funding this is as important because it will create the kind of people in the community you want? And that's our job, is to do that, is to create that within those companies a feeling that this is as important as something else that you're funding today.
If we think back to the founding of the university, President Tory said that uplifting the whole people is in fact our final goal, right? So again, for the students here today and for anybody in the room, what would you think is like a practical step in the moment right now? So we talked about perhaps the entrepreneurs in the room, what they could look to long term. What is a practical step that you would recommend to the people in the room as they leave this talk today?
So, I mean, I can look at it in different ways, but uplifting the whole people, the question we as part of the university ask, are we doing that? So for young people, the best way to have an impact is to volunteer. Right? Whether you volunteer in youth school or you volunteer in some of these entities that support the social networks, social services, homelessness, food bank, there's a number of them. Right? The way is to volunteer, provide your expertise, provide the kind of innovation and thinking you can. Right? But it also gives the students an understanding of what is the problem, right? And how complex the problem is. Because students coming out sometimes think, well, this problem should be solved, let's throw $500 million on it, it gets solved. It doesn't. Right? So once people understand how complicated the problem is, and then you start thinking about how you fix it. So through volunteering, and that's how I got my own knowledge, through volunteering I learned the plight of people, I learned what works, what doesn't work, what does, right? And so I have a healthy dose of respect to say that this problem is not going to be solved overnight. On the other hand, I also cannot expect somebody else to solve it. I also need to play a part. And no matter what I am doing, what is the part I'm going to play? And that's kind of, so in my role, for example, as Chancellor, my role and the role of the Senate is to say, let's do the award, let's try and encourage collaboration, let's to do this, so that's what we could do. But each individual can figure out within their own organizations and so on, what is it they can do.
Well, I believe that we are just at the end of our time here today. But volunteering is a fantastic practical thing that we can all do. So there's probably a number of people that still have some questions for you, and if you're around, they'd probably still like. But I would invite you to perhaps walk up to somebody that you don't know, and as part of your conversation, mention something that you volunteered for recently, and hopefully that'll provide even more discussion about social innovation, right? So thank you so much for your time.
No problem.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard and Eric and the Chancellor. I would also like to thank our guests and students for being a part of this conversation. I would like to remind you all of our next Lougheed Speaker Series on April 2nd on the topic of leadership and resilience, featuring our visiting guest speaker, Professor Cheryl Lightfoot from the University of Toronto. The Save the Date cards are found at our front registration table. We also invite you to stay and continue discussions informally and to share a meal prepared by our excellent food services team. So thank you again for spending your time with us this evening. I would like to invite our new agency singers for a closing song.